This meeting is now being recorded.
Great. So again, if you're having any trouble with your audio or your webinar, you can send me a private chat or you can shoot me an email at abra@clpha.org. I'll try to keep an eye on that during the webinar to troubleshoot. You can also let me or Cassie Brooks, our group facilitator, know after the fact if there's anything that you want us to know. So right now, everyone should be seeing a tree or a nature scene. I'll pull up the presentations in just a moment, and then you should be seeing those instead. I've gone ahead and put everyone on mute, so if you have a question, please use the Q&A. So you can see there's two chat bubbles in the top upper right portion of your screen. It says Q&A below it. If you click on that, you can go ahead and type a question. You can either send it privately or send it publicly. And then at the end of each presentation, we'll read from those to have our presenters answer your questions. You can also use the public chat section, which is in the lower bottom right. Just really up to you which you would prefer for asking questions. Obviously, we'll just go with as many questions as time allows, but if you have any questions after that weren't answered, I'm more than happy to make sure that those questions get answered for you. Just send me an email. Great. Well, today I'm very excited. We have a presentation on selection of metrics. So we have a really exciting presentation, I think, from the Chicago Housing Authority with very own Cassie Brooks, as well as some researchers at Chapin Hall, which is based out of the University of Chicago. So if there is nothing else from you, Cassie, any housekeeping, then you can go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. Thanks, Abra. I think this is a really interesting topic, and I'm happy to sort of update our group on what we've been doing at CLPHA so far as it relates to education for our residents and how we are starting to track our measures more and more. As always, I'm definitely available after the webinar if there's individual questions or if there's areas that you've thought of that maybe we didn't consider. We definitely want to keep those conversations going and work collaboratively. So in addition to CLPHA, we've been working with the Chapin Hall Collaborative for the past year, both as a research partner for just CLPHA, but also CLPHA is one partner in a larger collaborative. And so we're going to have Chapin Hall on for the bulk of the presentation to tell you a little bit more about that. But before they come on, I did want to provide a bit of background about CLPHA and our areas of interest. So this first slide just kind of covers a bit about our housing authority and its scale, as well as the mission and vision of our resident services team here at CLPHA. So we are a very large housing authority with 18,000 households in public housing, 43,000 in the voucher population. So when it comes down to youth, we've got about a 5-to-1 ratio, 4-to-1 ratio of total over 50,000 youth in our public housing and HCB population, and 10,000 of them specifically in public housing. We also do put together a variety of quarterly reports online, so I would definitely encourage you to look at those because they cover our sort of breadth of programs as well as current stats. But when we look specifically at resident services here at CLPHA, we focus on improving quality of life for all residents and supporting those on a path to self-sufficiency, and we are able to break that core goal, that core mission down into 4 impact areas. So these are the 4 impact areas that we focus on. Our economic, helping residents move towards self-sufficiency, earning power, helping those who are able to begin or advance a career, attain more earning potential, academic achievement, which is the one that I'm specifically focused on as education, and then stability and quality of life. So as I mentioned, I work specifically at CLPHA and with a focus on education. So the goal that is of key focus for me is the development of academic achievement, helping youth and adults to succeed throughout their academic career. A question that we continually come back to is, where are we as a public housing authority uniquely suited to reach residents to support their academic success? So how can we avoid duplication with other city services, maximize our resources? And that's a lot of where Chapin Hall has come in to help us identify, given our large scale what we can best use our resources to address. So within our resident services, we do focus, as I know many of you in the webinar do as well, specifically on early learning, school supports, college access and persistence, and then reentry for individuals who have fallen off our education pipeline. So we do have several core programs under CHA proper, if you will. So we have our own home visiting program. We also have, obviously, case management services available to all those youth in public housing. Those case managers work with families to do a youth intake as well as develop individual family goals. For both the voucher and public housing population, they have access to our CHA scholarship program, where we offer over 220 awards between $1,000 and up to $5,000 for CHA residents attending college, and there are a variety of support programs that go along with that. We also have our Partners in Education program, which is a partnership with City Colleges of Chicago, where residents can attend city colleges at no cost. That includes tuition, books, fees. We support all of our residents so that they can have a debt-free education. And then we do a variety of other college prep activities and work with students. Again, this is just focusing on the area of academic achievement. Our resident services team does a wealth of other initiatives and programs, but these are the ones that are specific to academic supports. And then outside of what we do as CHA proper, we also have a lot of partnerships and referral programs. So we connect closely around Head Start and early learning enrollment, tracking that regularly. We connect around school choice support. We work with Chicago Public Schools. We have a school choice system here in Chicago, and so we want to be able to support families in making their school choice, that they have the resources to support their choices. We also do have GED programs, both through city colleges and our city services. And then specific to Chicago Public Schools, we have a reentry program called SOAR, which is for any students under the age of 19 that have stopped attending school. There's a support program to get them back into school and into the right education setting for them. So outside of our direct programs, those are the kind of referrals that we do as well. So information on those programs you can find out on our website, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about those individual programs. But to not get too down into the parts of each program, I do want to sort of go over the metrics and the things that we cover when we are implementing our programs. Obviously, we have our internal benchmarks, the things that we count as far as are these programs growing, are residents staying continually engaged, if they're exiting, are they exiting for a positive reason, if they can't continue the program, and then obviously program quality evaluations, both from residents and external evaluators. And then our external data sets, we do partner with several of our city agencies, particularly around early learning enrollments. We have an agreement with the National Student Clearinghouse to access college enrollment information. And then we have a pair of data shares with our school system here in Chicago. One is through a group called Thrive, and then one is through Chapin Hall. So Chapin is on the call today and is going to talk a little further about those external data sets. And then the snapshot in the gray bar to your left is just a sample of what are the items we're tracking quarterly and annually. So we are tracking our early learning enrollments. We want to see more of our youth engaged in early learning programs and high quality programs as well, so we're tracking that. We are tracking referrals to our variety of programs, as we discussed or saw on the last slide, our GED, our reentry programs, our city colleges programs. We're tracking college enrollments overall and degree completions. We specifically break out our scholarship awardees and track their persistence. We obviously have a more in-depth relationship with those students year over year. We also are tracking youth goals for family through our youth intake and completion of those youth goals. And then overall, the use of school data through Chapin Hall and through Thrive. And that is kind of the overview from our CHA side of what we're looking at, and the data shares both for our internal and external. And I did see in the Q&A there was a question about we do award 220 scholarship awards annually. So those are, I can talk to anyone further about our scholarship program, but yes, we do make 220 awards annually, and those students do reapply each year. So yeah, that's kind of an overview of CHA and how we are structured and what are some of the things we're looking at. But I wanted to turn it over now to Chapin Hall to see if we can have you guys sort of give the overview of your work and how we work together. We have Nick, you there?
Yeah, sounds great. So I'm Nick Mader on the call. You can see me on the Global Meet window, but my colleague Kim Foley is also here. So we work together at many levels of the Chapin Hall Collaborative. Just a quick word on Chapin Hall, if you're not familiar with it outside of Chicago. We are a policy research institute that focuses on child and family welfare. The name Chapin Hall sounds like a dorm because once upon a time, back in the 19th century, it was a dorm. It was a home for orphan children. And through its legacy of direct service up until the 1980s, it eventually converted its mission, came on campus to the University of Chicago, but still had a focus on supporting the most disadvantaged youth in the city, the state. We also have a number of cross-state and national projects. So while this project in particular has a local focus, there are a lot of ways that we partner with other states, and we're really interested in the Q&A and the discussion that follows the presentation, just to see if there are ways that we can share resources or consider ways that we can design something or take what we've learned or designed from this context to help you in your work. So who we are, this is semi out of date, but only because there is some additional processing that we're doing in the new year. So while Chapin Hall does many types of work, including implementation evaluation, a lot of policy work, the Chapin Hall Collaborative in particular is a collaborative of public and private agencies, nonprofits that serve Chicago youth ages roughly 5 to 18, with a little bit of data linking possible before and afterward, to support youth development programming. And that includes many things. It has started with a traditional place-based after school, but it supports the activities of many public agencies in the city of Chicago, including the public libraries, the Chicago Housing Authority. We are now going to be joined by the City Department of Family and Support Services that does a jobs program and other engagement with youth with juvenile detention backgrounds, as well as groups that do mentoring, traditional after school based. And so there are a couple of important things that make us a collaborative. Broadly, we are a learning partnership that uses data to understand our impacts and improve our practice, but involves many things, including bringing data resources, but also leveraging the expertise of each one of the partners to understand operations better, discuss best practices, to think about strategic initiatives within the city, such as going to foundations to consider what we could do to help the organizations meet reporting requirements, or even potentially change some of the reporting requirements to better align with data that's available within the city. To give a little bit of differentiation, even though we are truly a non-hierarchical collaborative, Chapin Hall does have a distinction in being the only research partner that is within the collaborative. And for those of you that are not familiar, Chapin Hall is pretty distinctive in terms of having sort of institutional capacity within Chicago and the county and the state. So we have, over time, built relationships with a lot of data providers, such as the Chicago Public Schools, the Chicago Police Department, and we have established master data sharing agreements. And this is some of the biggest resources that we have to bring as we broker data access. And that means through the master data sharing agreements, we take data from those public agencies and we store it in-house on highly restricted servers that are managed by dedicated staff. And we also have a legal framework that allows us, project by project, to go to those data providers to propose new work. And so the Chapin Hall Collaborative work is one particular set of approvals where we have data from multiple stakeholders, and I'll go through that in the coming slides, where we link Chicago Public Schools data with data that we receive from the Chicago Housing Authority and our other partners and other public agency data sets. And it's linked at the individual level, so that is as a condition of having our established data security frameworks. And then we also understand the federal privacy frameworks, and we report data back in aggregate, but it provides a number of really helpful use cases, as both Cassie and I can try to answer if you have elements of interest. So Chapin Hall is a third party, which gives us some very good standing with respect to Federal Educational Rights and Privacy Act, other statutes for sharing, and also just being a nonpartisan voice within Chicago. And also as a research institution, we have expertise with doing data linking, even in cases where across data systems there is not a unique identifier, such as a social security number or a student ID, which wouldn't be available in a lot of data systems. And we assist with analysis and reporting. Likewise, we are not just the only folks doing the work. A lot of the value that accrues to each one of the partners is the expertise of the other partners, or the voice that they have within the Chicago as a community. So we receive leadership, that is the full collaborative receives leadership from the partners. We receive data directly from the partners, which enhances the perspective that we can bring to the academic data through our data sharing agreements. There is a diversity of programs, such as serving adolescents, with certain educational initiatives or college preparation initiatives, which can be compared across, not necessarily all partners, but across multiple partners within the collaborative. And even much more than Chapin Hall itself, our partner organizations have a sense of the ecosystem of practice. What's happening in City Hall, what's happening, with trends in delivering programming. So just to put a fine point on things, hopefully you're getting the sense of the partnership, but very intentionally, both in our contracts and our day-to-day work, the Chapin Hall Collaborative differs a lot from a traditional evaluation. Whereas a traditional evaluation would be about showing up, scoping a report, creating a report, writing a discussion section, and then leaving, we are not about rendering judgments of success or failure, and having that be point in time. We provide feedback, we provide learning, we tailor that to the needs of the partners, whether it's evaluative work or other work. Rather than being independent or an outside party, we meet regularly on a monthly basis to discuss the development of our indicators, making meaning from our reports, and that's also something that evolves according to the needs of the partners. Rather than producing images, generate something that's generalizable to other contexts, such as doing an evaluation of a program, where we report, for audiences in other cities. Our primary responsibility is to provide information to our partners that is specific to their context with their own data, with use that is up to date, or as real time as we can make it, with respect to the data refreshes that we get from our the data providers, such as Chicago Public Schools. And the idea is that if we did a single report in time, that's something that would become stale. That it would need a refresh every several years. But by contracting year over year with our partners, this is something where we bring in new data every year. And also, we do not control the evaluation. All of the work that we do and the structure of our contract is so that it is internal, that it is externally facing only to the extent that our partners request it, and that they really are in charge in terms of what helps them internally or to external audiences. So to say a little bit about the indicators, and I'll try to move quickly through this, and we can answer questions more according to your interest in the discussion. From the Chicago Public Schools, there are a number of things that are tracked which are relatively consistent across other school districts, mainly because of the legacy of federal reporting requirements. So we have information about school attendance. We also calculate chronic absenteeism, which has a particular local definition, although there are other national definitions of chronic absenteeism that go across contexts. We have test scores, both formative assessments and those that are done for state accountability. So typically that's grades 3 through 8 and 1 grade in high school. But other assessments that Chicago Public Schools choose to offer are ones that we can bring in for other grades. In Chicago, there's an indicator developed around freshman on-track status, which is really a reflection of adequate attendance and credit acquisition in ninth grade. We have indicators of high school graduation, individualized education plans, English language learner status, which are and gender and race ethnicity. And another interesting resource in Chicago is the My Voice, My School surveys, which is a very interesting assessment that is done by the Consortium on Chicago School Research in partnership with UChicago Impact. And that is administered at scale, ostensibly to all youth in grades 6 through 12, which get information about their personal study habits, their relationships with peers, their relationships with adults, their feeling of safety within the community, as well as other measures about in-school rigor of classwork and so forth. But there's a lot of interesting content there that we're able to bring in for the partners of the collaborative that give information about disposition and behaviors that might be a little bit more primary than test scores, which tend to get kind of a disproportionate focus. From our master data sharing agreements with other public agencies, we have some very rich information from the child welfare system. So the State Department of Child and Family Services, through them, we're able to indicate a history of abuse and neglect, whether substantiated or alleged, and whether that is in the current year or in previous years, and information about current or past out-of-home placements, which has sort of a different interaction with the Chicago Housing Authority's own population. At the very end of the year, we had finally brought in indicators from the Chicago Police Department, which gave indication of whether youth had been arrested, whether in the current year or in previous years, including the type, such as violent or nonviolent or index crime or so forth, and the history of arrests. We also have National Student Clearinghouse data on college enrollment and persistence from fall to spring and also fall to fall of the freshman and sophomore years. And there are a number of other things that we bring in that are sourced from the U.S. Census or also the City of Chicago data portal. From the City of Chicago, we have violent crimes per capita and just other information about the developmental context for youth. We bring in adult unemployment, educational attainment, child poverty, English-speaking or immigrant status, and vacant units. A couple of things that we have coming, and there are more things that we've been able to discuss in terms of what Chapin Hall has through our master data sharing agreements. We have permissions, but not yet indicators developed from the Juvenile Court of Cook County, and that information covers circumstances where a youth has been arrested and referred to the courts and what the proceedings are. So a little bit more serious than just an arrest. And from the Chicago Public Schools, we have yet to really dig into misconduct or transcript information. The only reason that we had prioritized that less than other indicators is because they're a little bit school or, well, mostly school specific in terms of what the disciplinary regime is or grading standards. But those are resources that we have available that we may likely be developing in the coming year or so. And so to put a fine, to underscore one important part of the distinction of what we're able to bring in is in addition to the types of indicators that Cassie mentioned that the Housing Authority is able to develop, we're able to broker access to a broader range of information about youth, and that indicates both outcomes like high school graduation or college attendance persistence or indicators from the Chicago Police Department, but it is not only for the indicators that are tracked by for the youth that are served by the Housing Authority, but also for the youth that are not served by the Housing Authority, but might be attending the same schools or living in the same communities as a benchmark. So we develop those comparison groups, and whether they extend beyond the Housing Authority's reach, or also comparisons within the Housing Authority's data. We develop targeted indicators, from month to month in our working groups. We have conversations with each one of our partners about what indicators we should be developing, what the priority is. And we also have customized views. So we have a lot of programming code that aims to, as scalably as possible and as flexibly as possible, follow each partner's need in terms of how it's helpful to report the data. And we'll show you some of that, but we can talk about other things that we work on. So I'll show you some views in a moment, but Cassie, do you want to set the scene?
Yeah, exactly. Just before we sort of share some views of how we match data sets or data points across our partnership to make some meaning out of it, I did want to sort of provide a little more background on CHA data and sort of what we knew. So this is sort of what we know, but it's really what we knew. This is what we, before meeting Chapin Hall, this was some of the data that we tracked. And then Maria, I see your questions about what databases we use, so I will detail that as I go through this slide. Obviously, we knew household information, which is the sort of the basics of their residency with CHA. So our household information is maintained in a database system called Yardi. And so all of that is information that specific to that. The case management information we track in a Salesforce system. So we have a system developed with our case management providers where they track their goals and their engagement with residents in Salesforce between our agencies. And then program-specific data, so that would be anything that CHA does, like our summer programs or our scholarship programs, anything that we're doing year over year at CHA. We also have another database called CitySpan, which is how we track attendance and program enrollment. So that one's a little more in-house, and that is, but that is also a system that the city uses. So there are some partnerships where we work across agencies. So we use 3 databases to sort of capture information on our families, our residents. And so from that, you can see this little guide to the right has this would be basic information that we would know before working with someone like Chapin Hall. We would know their age, the number of people in the household, the development they live in, and for our purposes, what that means, what region they're a part of, and who their case management provider is. We'd know their AMI for their family, and then we'd know any individual goals that either the student self-reported or was working with a case manager on. That would be something, some information we would have. So the next bit is then starting to think about what from Chapin's list of indicators are unique identifiers that can help us to organize and identify our resident population. So, we want to be able to look and identify unique characteristics of our communities because we have developments across the city in different neighborhoods. If there are any unique classifications for individual developments or individual regions that we're serving. I should, as a caveat, I know that we have the luxury in Chicago of being all one school district. I recognize many of you on this webinar are probably working with 4 or several different districts, especially if you're working with a larger region. So we do have that uniqueness with our setup here. We also want to be able to identify associations with other factors. So if we can look at some of those data by their housing subsidy, whether they're in the voucher program or the public housing program, based on the geographic region they live in, or if there are any other factors that can show trends. And then the context for our group, our CHA youth, versus CPS overall versus what Nick brought up, which I think is a very key point, and our school-based peers. So us finding, as in particular CPS is a very large district, for us to be able to evaluate not just our CHA youth, but who are their comparison youth at their same school, so that we can evaluate within a greater context, not looking at just the entirety of the district, but how are youth being compared against their peers at their same schools. So that has been a very big key for us and a big partnership of working with Chapin Hall that has helped us a lot, and something that I would ask or have you consider as you form your own data partnerships or work in your own districts to include that view as part of your, if possible, or work to include that view as part of your sort of overall analysis and supports. The next slide, there we go. So what things we were interested in having Chapin Hall look at for us is obviously how are youth doing at particular developments based on income, based on community areas, whether there's difference between the programs, and then also to look at individual school areas to understand if there is a discrepancy between our youth and their school-based peers, even at individual school levels. So we are going to take a look at some of these examples. And we are, I can, as before I toss it over to, back to Nick, we are giving some data here as a representation. This is not our actual data, it's representative data so that you can see across the views that we have. So Nick, do you want to take it from here?
Sure, yeah. So this is all, so it is not fully randomized data. It's sort of following patterns that are relatively familiar. And so I can, to your interest, I can represent, like the types of patterns that we're seeing. But yeah, just to emphasize, these are not real numbers. And I also realize there are little discrepancies across slides because we really just added random numbers to your real numbers. So yeah, if you find something alarming, take it with a grain of salt. The kind of progression of conversations that we wanted to be able to sponsor in terms of data use have this type of statement as a starting point, that if we were able to link in data, we would have a number that is fully decontextualized. Youth in a sample organization that attend the Chicago Public Schools had an average attendance rate, that should say a chronic absenteeism rate of 19.3% in a given school year. So that's something that isn't particularly helpful until you realize something more like, for the Chicago Public Schools, it was something pretty close to 12%. So in the first place, there is a Chicago Public Schools relative benchmark. As Cassie said, it's a big district. It's a very diverse district. There are some of the best schools in the state are in Chicago. Some of the worst schools in the state are in Chicago. So it's something that's not very well tailored. As a first cut, we produce views like this, where we have a Chicago Public Schools number and the number for the organization overall, just so that we can get a sense of scale. But we also construct these customized benchmarks, such as school-based peers. So how are the kids in the same schools that you are serving doing relative to your youth? And so here, when we produce a view, something like this, the way to interpret that is that the organization is serving schools or youth in schools, that are more disadvantaged or have, kind of a tougher track record than the representative student in the entire district. And we can see how the youth compare. And then there's, kind of a tricky question. I'll get to this later on in the slides is, in some sense, this is a good thing because we can see that organizations, so this is a very common representation where the sample organization youth or the organizations that we serve have relatively disadvantaged or lower performing youth. But the way to interpret that is to realize that it is a good thing that they are serving disadvantaged youth. But it raises the question of are we ameliorating things, or have we failed to, or even if we haven't fully remediated every disadvantage that youth have, are we still doing a good job? Views like this help to start to add context. Also along the way, and this is something that we've developed hand in hand with our partner organizations, are ways that we can break apart any given indicator to improve the dialogue and consideration about what there is to be done. So relative to this prior slide, where this is a chronic absenteeism measure across all youth, we have another set of views that we've established is something that breaks things down by grade. Absenteeism is a phenomenon, kind of a developmental phenomenon that differs significantly by youth age. So for younger ages, that's something that is more of a family process. Our families organized to be getting kids to school, whereas for later ages, that can be much more of a voluntary thing as youth gain more personal agency. So splitting things up for this sample view, the sample organization has something of chronic absenteeism problem in elementary grades, even relative to youth at the same schools. In middle school, this, at least in this randomized view, there isn't any special consideration relative to peers. But then in high school, you see this division happen again. That there is service to more disadvantaged kids relative to the district. And looking at this school-based peers number, but there's also a divide in terms of the behavior of youth that are being served directly. And so this type of split by the characteristics of youth is something that we do in a number of different ways. Some of it is by grade, some of it is by gender, some by free reduced price lunch, but we've built a platform so that we can examine all of those crosstabs. Another set of work that we do with each one of our partner organizations is that we use information that are tracked within the databases of our partners. So Cassie had mentioned that there is information about family average median income status, and so when we have that label attached to individuals for information on their families, we're able to do breakdowns on that and to do crosstabs, not just for youth within those categories, but also look across time. So this is another sample view that we create where we have information that goes across. I'll show my cursor. So you can read multiple ways that within a given school year, you can see the patterns of chronic absenteeism from lowest income families, higher, where this indicator seems to show improvement to get a sense of the gradient of association. And it's also something that you can read across here, so you can see for a given segment if there appear to be improvements. And again, this is, well, it's random numbers, but it is just a sample of the cuts that we make, and we actually have a number almost in danger of too many. And just another look. So whereas this is customized for the Chicago Housing Authority to a type of indicator that they have on youth, which promotes one type of conversation about youth needs, this is another breakdown of indicators where we compare chronic absenteeism across schools where they do work. And the way that this conversation can be different is that this is closer to administrative service. So here, whereas we're talking about youth needs, here there's a conversation of, well, like staff in, that are serving schools B, E, to a slightly lesser extent D, are serving populations that are more regularly attending schools. Schools A, C, and F are those that have different needs in terms of their students or their youth. So that kind of naturally indicates ways that you can take the data and not come to a conclusion on it, but raise conversations that can help inform practice. One other explanation about type of analysis that we do, which I tried to foreshadow a little bit in some of the earlier slides, is we use statistical analysis to break apart cause and effect. And so one thing to realize in youth work is for any given effect, there are many causes. And so you think about chronic absenteeism, some of that is family situation, some of that is neighborhood and developmental environment. Some of that is what a youth's trajectory is, how engaged they were in school last year and the years before, and other disadvantages they happen to have experienced. So when we do crosstabs, that gives you perspective on the gradient for one factor, such as AMI bracket. But really what we want to do is when we take a look at a youth's trajectory, we want to compare it to similar youth on many factors of the breadth of indicators that we were able to bring in. And so this chart, and I'll kind of walk through this because it gets a little bit wonkish, this is a kind of a representation. Each one of these bars is a refinement over the bar to its left, where we continually add perspective. And for those of you who will join me in the wonkiness, this is using statistical regression techniques. And regression is kind of broadly refers to a class of techniques where you simultaneously account for many factors. So in general, each one of the bars indicates a difference in chronic absenteeism rate between the youth in the sample organization and the comparison. And what we do is, across these bars, we improve and refine the way that we make the comparison. So this leftmost bar is the sample organization's youth versus Chicago Public Schools all as a benchmark. So this is a very apples to oranges type exercise. And so with adding kind of random numbers to this, there is a 15% or a little bit more than that differential between the youth that are served and the youth in the district. And this comes with the kind of mixed perspective of we're serving disadvantaged youth, but more disadvantaged youth than is typical in the district, but we don't know if they're doing better as a result of being associated with our programming. So, here, this is fully apples to oranges. The kids that are being served by the organization have many disadvantages that are not borne by the Chicago Public Schools population overall. But if we step one refinement over, what we can do is we can account for youth prior patterns of attendance. So we take a look at kids, and so this is focused on 9th grade. We take a look at whether kids were attending school or how well they were attending school in 8th grade, and for each youth, we build a comparison group of other youth in CPS who are not served by the partner organization who were attending school at a similar level in 8th grade. And you can see that the differential goes down because improving that comparison accounts for some of the disadvantage in the youth that are being served by this partner organization. Then we can do an additional refinement and we can account for other demographic information: race, ethnicity, free reduced price lunch status, neighborhood characteristics, and so forth. And that also explains and accounts for a lot of the apparent disadvantage of the youth served relative to other youth who are not being served. And then we add information about GCFS indicators like child abuse and neglect. And so as a consequence of the adding random numbers, this looks like less of a differential. But adding that information also adds additional perspective. And this is something where the refinements kind of go left to right, and they extend as we continue to do the work. Just to put a fine point on it, if Chapin Hall was charged with doing an evaluation report for our partners, this right-hand statistical analysis is the thing that we would be forced to wind up with, because that is the most advanced state of our data, and we would say, well, it looks like, even compared to very similar youth, the youth that are being served by our partner organizations are not doing so well. And if you gave that a causal interpretation, then you would say, well, these organizations are doing a terrible job, that they're actually hurting youth relative to comparison groups, when in fact the much more likely answer is that there are just different types of disadvantage that we aren't able to represent in the data. And there's a class of things that we're likely never going to be able to represent adequately in terms of systematically collected electronic variables. But then there are other things where, as a local partner, where we work and we develop the analysis year over year, we can have a conversation about saying, well, we need to be taking an indication of arrest history, or we need to be doing more of a tailored look. So whereas these numbers are an indication of being enrolled in any level of in any amount of programming, we want to do this exercise separately for youth who are just enroll in services but never really attend versus those that get a larger dosage. And so those are the types of conversations that we have year over year with each of our partners, both in kind of an overall way so that we can foster conversations about practice, conversations about the completeness of our data, but also do tailored work for our partners. So there are other things to discuss. I think that we'll hold it off here. We're very interested for your questions as you have them.
Yeah, and I just wanted to, hey, this is Cassie again, just wanted to respond to, some of the questions that I see in the chat. Maria, I see your question about in current tracking, does the CHA students being tracked, do they graduate at a higher rate than the local school districts? They do not, and that is part of, as Nick has been going through these latter slides, the discussion further is what are those factors as to why, or that could be a part of the discrepancy between our students and the rest of the district. And obviously they are much closer to their peer groups within those schools. And there are indications and there are different slices of our data where they do perform at the same level or even better than their school-based peers. So a lot of this has been, this process is about us understanding more about those trends and where there are cases and scenarios that are against the trends, and us analyzing those further. So this has been, we've been working with Chapin Hall for 1 year at this point, and we've been doing several data matches, and so we are getting to that point where we are able to make more meaning from the data, but we can look at some of those overall trends and dial down to different slices of the data based on any of the indicators that he's discussed to take a look at where are cases where there's going against the trend. And sorry.
And yeah, Cassie, that was really helpful. We did have another question that I think you've partially answered, but if you can expand a little bit, I think we can completely answer it. So the question was about how long it took to establish a meaningful data set, and if this included starting with one or two partners and expanding from there, or what might be the plan for that kind of the future of this work.
Sure. So I can say that we have joined the collaborative in what was the second year of the collaborative. So there was a first round of partners that we were not a part of. And currently our relationship in terms of obviously data and maintaining that security is between us and Chapin Hall, but we do work collaboratively with those other youth-serving partners to understand a bit more about the youth we are collectively serving, and get an understanding of, when are other people seeing similar trends and discussing those at a large scale. Nick, did you want to say more about the Chapin Hall sort of startup?
Well, so I will say that our path was significantly smoothed by the fact that we had existing data sharing agreements that we could draw on. If anyone is interested, and Abra, if we're able to get our contact information out there, there are some documents on the web that can be helpful. There's a group at the University of Pennsylvania called Actionable Intelligence for Social Policy, where they have white papers that describe ways to approach getting master data sharing agreements. I also think that one thing that has helped us relative to other cities that I know that have attempted the same thing is that Chapin Hall is a third-party, nonpartisan, local research partner. So even with our sort of best case, it took several years to get rolling. So we're in the third year now of the collaborative, and we do have some really great data access, so including child welfare, police department, National Student Clearinghouse. It took us about a year to get the Chicago Public Schools permissions all the way. Does that answer the question specifically, or are you also, was the question also about setting up data tracking at the Housing Authority?
Oh, unsure, but I think that or one of the items is the fact that you are a collaborative. There are a number of staff people working at Chapin Hall, and Kim, who's also on the line, is specifically our contact for CHA and a handful of other organizations. But there are, I guess, a lot of staff behind it as well. Would be also something worth noting. I can also say, I know Maria also put in a question about, is there a requirement to attend school? It is a part of our ACOP. We did not use an additional lease addendum to focus on school attendance, but that requirement is a part of our residency here at CHA. I can say that some of the things that we have used Chapin Hall. Again, this is a process that we are in with Chapin Hall in terms of understanding more of our data. We have been able to use it at this point, the data, to target some of our services. I can give an example. We actually were able to identify which developments matched for like English language learner status at our with CPS, and we were able to do a lot more targeting around even just something as simple as that, understanding which of our developments have a greater English language learner population. That has been one of an easier development to sort of action, as opposed to some of our school attendance and some of our school academic records, but there have been some small areas we've been able to action it. And in the future, we are definitely looking to provide them with data indicators of our families that are attending our programs more regularly, and being able to break that out as another subgroup. I know that people had some questions about that, if we were able to look at those that are actually using our services against the population overall of CHA. So that is definitely a subset we're looking to dive a little deeper into. So this is definitely a work in progress, but we look forward to updating you as we go through it and get some more actionable items to use. But yeah, if there's other questions, please let us know.
So I guess while people are possibly still typing other questions, Cassie, there was a question just with a little bit more detail about how CHA's scholarship program is funded and how that might be a replicable or sustainable model for other housing authorities interested in doing that or their own program.
Yeah, the scholarship program is funded through a variety of sources. It's not all of our support. Some of it is we do have some Section 3 allocations from some of our Section 3 towards it. We do have some outside scholarship providers. I'd be happy to talk to. I know there's a couple people on the line who have scholarship programs. That may be another good topic for us in the future, or maybe one of our breakout groups. But it is a number of sources. And then we are also starting to approach individual universities. Again, now that we know some of the college enrollment data, we're able to reflect back to universities and let some of them know who's got a number of our students or is growing in that area, and then who can are we hoping to have more students as part of their institution and encouraging them to make supports available to our residents and families. So we definitely try to seek to build the program.
Great. Well, if anyone has any final thoughts, please go ahead and type them now into the public chat or the Q&A section so we can get those answered for you. But as always, I'm happy to connect anyone with anyone, either another participant on the call or any of the presenters. I'm sure they would be happy to answer any other questions you may have about specific slides or this topic in general. So thank you so much to Cassie and Chapin Hall, Nick and Kim for presenting today. I think there was a lot of really fantastic information. And this was recorded, so if you didn't catch all of it or you want to share it with a colleague, as soon as it's available, it usually takes a few days for the recording to process. I'll go ahead and put it in the group's Google Drive, and I'll send you all an email to let you know that it's there. I've already put a copy of this slide deck into the Google Drive, so if you wanted to look at some of the slides more closely, you can do that as well. So with that, Nick, Cassie, any final thoughts?
Just one more pitch to everybody that's on the phone. One thing that we've been increasingly interested in doing is identifying partnerships across other cities. I don't think that anybody here is representing the Twin Cities in Minnesota, but they're within their school district. They are also working at developing methods to do the comparison, the same types of comparison work, and to be using free and open source tools, so that those could be developed for the purposes of sharing that across cities. So if there are research partnerships that you also have in your own cities where a researcher has standing to be able to get information about comparison youth to be doing these same types of activities, you should definitely be in touch because we have a lot of interest in terms of developing a multi-city kind of code base or set of resources so that we can kind of decrease the costs or make wins more easily reachable when cities do have a research partnership and data sharing agreements.
Yeah,
thank you so much for the opportunity to share some of our work.
And I'll just second what Nick said. This is a topic that's very important for CLPHA as well. So if there's, I'd certainly, if you do end up connecting with Nick, it would be really helpful for me to know that. And if you just want to talk more about it, then I'd love to set up a time with any of you to do that. Great. Well, thank you again so much. And you all know where to find me if you have further questions or you want to connect with anyone. Thanks so much, everyone, for your time today.
Thanks.
Thank you.